Hi, my name is Reets. Tonight I'm going to read you the true story of Helen Keller. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Sweet dreams. In the year 1880, there was a beautiful farm in Alabama with a cute little house. The front porch was covered with climbing roses and honeysuckle vines. There were hummingbirds everywhere, and one could hear the bees buzzing in the summer breeze. This was the home of a little girl named Helen Keller. Helen was the firstborn child in her family. She was a rambunctious little girl. She could walk by the time she was 1 year old, and you could often hear her repeating the words that her parents said. One day in February, when Helen was 19 months old, she came down with her fever. Her temperature was high and she could barely breathe. The doctors were worried that she might not make it through the night. Eventually, the fever went down and Helen's parents rejoiced. They thought that the worst was behind them. But after that fever, little Helen was never the same. She had been a normal, healthy child, and now she couldn't see and she couldn't hear. Her world that had been so colorful was now covered in darkness. She couldn't mimic her parents' words anymore. The only word she remembered was water. Now, instead of learning things by sight, she had to learn them by feel. She would hold on to her mother all day long and follow her around while she did her chores. Helen learned how to find and fold her own clothes. She learned how to mimic actions to describe what she wanted to eat. She would mimic slicing bread or opening the freezer if she wanted ice cream. She learned how to wave hello and goodbye to the family's guests. Even though Helen developed skills and signs to navigate her new world, she still had extreme frustration. She would kick, scream, and have tantrums because she couldn't express herself. Sometimes she would end up hurting Martha, her caretaker. Other times she would run out into the garden and put her face in the vines where she could still smell and feel the flowers. Helen was a very smart little girl, but sometimes she would end up in dangerous situations. She almost lit her apron on fire one day because it was wet and she wanted to dry it, so she kept getting closer and closer to the fire until her clothes were burning. Another time, her baby sister was in the cradle that Helen used for her doll. She didn't know that it would hurt her baby sister if she took her out of the cradle, so she almost dumped her sister out to make room for her doll. But thankfully, her mom was there to catch the little sister. Helen had a sense of humor, but she didn't understand what being mean was yet. This resulted in some awful pranks, like locking her mother in the closet. Her parents loved Helen and would do anything to help her. Her anger and frustration were getting worse as she got older. When she was 6 years old, they took her to a famous eye doctor, and he couldn't help her. But he told them to go visit a well-known inventor who studied the deaf. His name was Alexander Graham Bell. He had been working on an invention where people could talk to each other from long distances. It was called the telephone, and you may have heard of it. Bell's interest in hearing originated from his mother, who had slowly gone deaf. His wife Mabel was also deaf. Because of them, Bell spent years studying how people who could not hear learned to communicate. When Helen met Bell, she immediately felt at ease. She sat in his lap and he showed her how to make his watch strike. Most people couldn't understand Helen's makeshift sign language, but Alexander understood her immediately. He spoke to her parents and he let them know that he believed their daughter could be taught to read and write. He would find her a teacher. Ellen knew that Alexander had opened up a whole new world of possibilities for her. In Helen's own words, "Thus I came up out of Egypt and stood before Sinai, and the power divine touched my spirit and gave it sight, so that I beheld many wonders. And from the sacred mountain I heard a voice which said, Knowledge is love and light and vision." Through Alexander, the family was able to find a teacher for the blind. A few months later, in March of 1887, Anne Sullivan arrived at the Keller family's home. At first, teaching Helen was very difficult. Anne would spell words into Helen's palm using the manual alphabet, but Helen didn't understand that those finger movements stood for real things. Then one day, standing beside a water pump, Anne let the cool water flow over one of Helen's hands while spelling Water into the other. Suddenly, Helen's world opened up. She learned all the different letters and how to spell words. Now Helen had a new way to communicate. She could write letters in her friends' and family's palm to let them know what she was thinking. But this still felt limiting to Helen. She didn't know that other people communicated via spoken language because she couldn't see or hear. But she could feel vibrations and feel lips moving, so she knew that people were communicating via their mouths. Helen could make sounds such as laughter or crying, but she didn't know the sounds of words. The only word she remembered from before she got sick was water, which she pronounced wawa. When she was 10, one of her teachers told her about a little deaf-blind girl in Norway who had been taught to speak. Helen was determined with every bone in her body to learn to speak. Her teacher taught her to speak by making sounds, while Helen would put her hand over her mouth to feel what she was doing with her lips and mouth. After 11 lessons, Helen spoke her first sentence. It is warm. After that, progress was slow, but Helen was motivated because she knew that once she learned to speak, her little sister would be able to understand what she was saying. This was just the beginning for Helen. Learning to read and write opened her world. What was once just darkness became endless possibility. Helen became the first deaf-blind person to go to college. She wrote several books and gave motivational speeches in over 30 countries. She met lots of U.S. presidents and became friends with celebrities like Mark Twain and Charlie Chaplin. Her strong will, paired with a love of knowledge, led to a truly extraordinary life. Sweet dreams.